So Ange and I, when we were first dating, I was following her dad. We were going to some event. I think it was Richmond, but I'm not positive where we were at. Really vague stories. I remember all the emotions. I just don't remember the details. We were trying to get to a place, and we were behind Angie's dad. They had carload, and it was just her and I, and she gave me instructions. You know, we're just dating, and so I don't know all the family dynamics. She says, stay real close to Dad. Duh, I got this. Yeah, I'm following. This is way before, phones with GPS on them. We didn't have one of those little Garmins, and so we're just gonna, we're just gonna stay close. That makes sense. Good, stay close. Car slipped in between us, and that was not a big deal. It's just one car. Right? So one car is between us. I can still see Dad. It's not two cars actually slipped between us. You see, when I'm following somebody, I hate to be on their bumper. Do you hate to be on their bumper? It bothers me. So I have to give enough room behind the car, and it allows people to slip in. I get that. Angie reminded me again. Stay close to Dad. I told you, get up there. Well, I can't get up there. I mean, there's another lane of traffic that's going slower than us. I can still see them. I'm good. It's only two cars. It's three cars now. And so I decide I'm going to change my tactic here, and I'm going to ride the bumper of the guy, this third car, because one of the cars in between us is kind of large, and I am losing track of where Dad is. If he turns off, I'm not going to know it right away. And so I decide I'm just going to ride this bumper. Nobody else is going to get in between us. And besides, if you ride somebody's bumper, they might get irritated enough, right, that they'll just pull over like into the slower lane, like, get this guy off my tail. Well, he doesn't pull over. In fact, he gives 3 taps on his brakes. That's the universal sign for back off, buddy. And so, of course, I'm jerking back, and Ange over there, who never gets mad, is getting furious. She's getting red. There's steam coming out. I'm like, who am I dating here? And so I'm trying to figure out what to do. By the way, when he backs off, this isn't my fault, okay? This is my fault. When he hits his brakes 3 times, a 4th car snuck in between him. It wasn't me this time. It was him. And I knew it was 4 because Angie was counting. She's not just a math teacher. This really mattered to her. We did make it to our destination. It was kind of iffy at times, but we did make it. And the other good news is she did start talking to me again after 2 weeks. No, actually that night we talked, and I learned something about her dad I did not know. She said, it wasn't that I was afraid we'd get lost. When we get lost, we pull over, we ask somebody for directions. I said, will you repeat that? Because as a guy, I've never heard that before. She said, it's not that if you get lost, that's what I was so upset. Who cares? I cared about my dad, and I know something about my dad, and he would be checking the rearview mirror over and over again, wanting to know if we were behind him, because he feels responsible for getting us there safely. He worries about us. He worries especially if a car gets in between, or 3 or 4, 8. He worries about that stuff. It concerns him. We get lost, we can get directions. It was important to me that we stayed close to Dad. Following somebody casually and following somebody closely is a huge difference, isn't it? And that following closely, that requires a lot of patience. God's story, if you think about it, if you go through his book to us that gives us his story, it's all about following him, isn't it? It's all about this, let's have a relationship in which I am going to lead and you follow right behind me, and I'll give you the best rules in order to get there safely. We call them like thou shalt nots and thou shalls, right? But they're rules for getting there safely. The entire story of God, and especially when you look at the Old Testament and Israel's history, is all about, are you going to follow me closely? And they were sometimes good at that, oftentimes not so good at that. Sometimes they just pulled over to the side of the road. Other times they got distracted and let other cars in because they looked it looked interesting, it looked good. There are times, and we could talk about this, but we don't have time this morning, but there are times where I think they just kind of sped up and tried to run God off the road. But that's a whole different story in Israel's history. They're not very good at following. They're not very good at patience. And so God has something to say to us through their story, doesn't he? So let's just talk about one of those stories. Let's talk about a time where there was this man named Samuel. Samuel's an older guy at this time, and he is got a couple of sons who don't have the best reputation, that are helping him because he's getting up there in years. This is during the age where judges ruled the land, but they aren't like judges we know with gavel and benches. They're warriors, really, and they're people that lead to help God lead, because God really is in charge. Prophets speak for God, judges fought for God, and so you had Samuel and his sons who were helping God lead. Well, some of the Israelites got together and decided, we're kind of concerned. So they approach Samuel and they have a conversation saying, we got some concerns about you and about your sons. And here's what they say. You are old. That's pretty blunt, pretty straightforward. And your sons do not walk in your ways. They had a reputation for being a little greedy and a little dishonest at times. None of this would have really surprised Samuel. I think at some point you fight it as long as you can, but you get to the place where, yeah, I'm old, if I have to use something to hold me up, I'm getting there, right? So he understands this, that his days are numbered. They're worried that if you go, it's just your sons, and your sons aren't there yet. Your sons aren't like you. And then they say something that Samuel was not expecting, did not want to hear. They say this, now appoint a king to lead us. A king. Wait a second. Samuel would have said, you want a king? You have a king. You have a glorious king. You have a king who sits on the throne of heaven. You have a king who rules. He's the creator. He knows his creation, and he is our king. All I am is a voice box for God. All my sons are to fight for God. You have a king. You have a king. They said, no, we want a king such as all the other nations have. Because we look around and they have these kings that get to dress up in nice robes and they look cool. And they ride their horses in such a way that I don't know how they get the horses to do that, but it's kingly. And they got these parades. We love parades. We don't have any parades. We need parades. We need a king because kings look good. Kings, they show power. They let everybody else know who's in charge, and there's lots of pomp and lots of circumstance. We love that. We want that. And it's possible they're using the excuse of the boys. Your sons just aren't there yet. They're not going to be mature enough to lead us like we want. We want a king. Now here's the reality. They wanted a king because they could see a king. Prophets had been speaking for God for hundreds of years. Judges recently had been ruling in a position of fighting for God for several years. But no one can see God. In heaven, God sits on the most glorious throne. You talk about pomp and circumstance. We're described in the prophets themselves that they were able to read. There's this description of these layers of gems that are underneath the floor of the very throne on which the King of Kings sits. There's amazing descriptions of this king. This king is in a place where the streets are gold and the gates are pearls, and they have enough information to know that this is one impressive kingdom. And this is their king. But they couldn't see him. They had to use their imagination. But they looked around and they saw there were other kings that they could see, and they liked them very much. And they wanted to be like those kings. Besides, those other nations, they don't respect us because all they see is an old man and sons that aren't behaving right. And they don't see anything that represents that we have authority, that we have power, that we have sovereignty here. We want a king. I think a lot of times you and I struggle to be patient because we're so attracted to what we can see. We have principles we've been taught. We have ideals that we hold on to. We have teachings. We have commandments and direction. We have dreams and we have hopes. And all of those are wonderful things. They are good things, especially if they're godly. The problem is you can't see any of them. You can't hold on to any of them. What you can only see and hold on to is around you. And we get distracted. And we get distracted easily by what we can see. We talked last week about hope. And hope is an anchor for our souls. Hope is something that helps us in this world that has gone mad at times. Okay, at most times. In this world that is struggling to keep a true north, our anchor holds us north, right? It is what keeps us. But our hope is in something in the future. Our hope is in a better tomorrow, isn't it? Isn't that what hope is? And what God has asked us to do is to place our hope in the greatest tomorrow we could possibly imagine. So not only is heaven itself the image of the kingdom that is perfect, full of all the glory and beauty we could possibly imagine, but this future is for us. Mansions and peace and no more tears and unity and everything good. And He gives us this hope. This is the anchor to our soul. The problem is what we tend to do is place our hope in the more immediate because we can see the immediate. A better job advancement, a better relationship, a better income. We look for something that is very temporary. In fact, we shorten it up oftentimes because we just don't have a reliance upon imagination. What we have is a reliance upon tactile things that we can see and feel. And so we see other people that are succeeding. We see other people that are getting ahead. We see other people that are advancing. We want that. We desire that. And so we place our hope in the immediate, in our ability to connect, in our ability to perform, in our ability to advance, in our own looks, in our own in our own passions. We put it in us, and we put it in close people around us. Even if those people have failed us before, we have this bad habit of shrinking our hope down to the immediate. And what happens is the more and more that we trust in those around us, the less and less we are patient. It is as if we are letting others in, or we're pulling off to the side. We're no longer following closely behind God. Samuel is distraught by all of this. He leaves the people and says, I've got to spend some time with God. And he shares with God how upset he is because here are people who should know better. They have a history with God. They should know that God is their king, that God is in control. But they don't. And so he complains to God. God, look at what your people are doing. And here's what God says in response. Listen to all that the people are saying to you. Listen. I don't want to listen to them because all that they're saying is we don't need you guys. We don't need you. We don't need your son. We don't need God. God says, no, I want you to listen to them. And I want you to know it's not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. And he says, as they've always done from the very beginning when I brought them up out of Egypt until this day. They placed their entire hope on the things they can see. You remember when I brought them out of Egypt? They created this calf out of all their gold jewelry. So they had like this cow that they were bowing down and worshiping. Why? Well, the Creator God who rains down 10 plagues upon Egypt, who is the most powerful being they've ever seen, split the Red Sea. And they're building a little cow. Why? Because they can see it. This is what they're like. They're completely impatient. They cannot wait. This is what they do. Forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. It's nothing new. And then he says for the second time, now listen to them. Why does he repeat himself? It's for emphasis, obviously. Listen to them. Basically what he's saying is, Samuel, listen to their request, and give it to them. What? God, you're their king. They don't need a king. No. Listen to them. Give them what they want. So Samuel's about to leave. He says, wait, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do. And so Solomon goes back, and he shares with the people, listen, are you sure you want a king? I mean, you know what he's going to do, don't you? A king is going to take all your sons, the ones you love, you raised them, and he's going to put them in service. Who do you think it is that guards his palaces? Who do you think it is that rides those horses in his parades? It is your own sons he's going to take. He's going to put your sons into the army to fight his battles. And then he's going to take the others and make them farmers so that he can have food on his lavish tables, and he's going to take others and have them make the weapons and the armor, and then he's going to take your girls. Your little girls have grown up and you've just invested your life in. He's going to make them cooks, and he's going to make them sewers, and he's going to make them bakers, and he's going to make them perfumers. He's going to take your best. In fact, he's going to take your best land. He's going to take your best crops. He's going to take your best vineyards and your best groves, and it's going to be his. And then, on top of that, after he has all that he wants, he's going to tax you like crazy, because how else is he going to put on all those gold and lavish parties that he's going to have and those beautiful parades you like so much? It's going to cost you. It's going to be your own taxes, and he's going to heavily tax you. And then when you finally decide, you know what, I'm not sure I like this king thing. Can we renegotiate God? God's going to say, I'm not listening to you. Are you sure you want a king? You see, getting a king is not all it's cracked up to be, is it? A king is not as fancy as you think. In fact, when you and I chase kings of this world, they always seem to overpromise and underdeliver, don't they? They always seem to ask for more, demand more out of us when we follow them. And they never take us to the destination that we're hoping for. This is what it's like to follow the kings and the kingdoms of this world. And so the people put their fingers in their ears and they're, we can't hear you, we're not listening. They say, we refuse to hear you. No, they said, we want a king over us. Please, 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 please. We want a king so badly. Please, please, please. Come on, give us that king. Then we'll be like all the other nations. Why? Because people will see our king. It's all about what you can see. And a lot of us struggle with that because it's all about what we can see. It should be a huge indication that we struggle with impatience when we go after only what we can see instead of trusting in what we know. And so Samuel's going to go back to the people and report, okay, you can have your king. And God gives them a king. In fact, he gives them exactly what they want. And I don't mean just a good-looking king, because he does. God selects someone who is handsome and someone who is tall and someone who looks good in the robe. God gives that to them because they want it. But he also gives them something else. He gives them someone that's just like them. Someone who doesn't follow God very closely, that gets distracted by other things that they can see. This king is going to be one who displays an impatience that just reflects the impatience of the people he's serving. So Samuel is going to provide this parade because they want to parade. They want the pomp and circumstance. You got it. Samuel's going to provide it. Here's the deal. Let's have every tribe. So nobody knows who's going to be king. In fact, it's interesting how Samuel found the king that will reign over these people. The first time that we're introduced to this king, this is a guy named Saul. He is out trying to find, with another servant, going from village to village, find his daddy's donkeys. The donkeys have gotten lost. Now, I don't know if we can read too much into the fact that he's searching for donkeys the first time we're introduced to Saul. I don't know if we can do that, but it is kind of a strange thing, isn't it? I think we can read into the fact, though, that this man, Saul, wants to give up early on finding donkeys. He doesn't find them, and he wants to give up. It's actually a servant who says, no, let's not give up. Let's not give up. We can find these donkeys. Let's keep going. There's a town coming up called Ramah. There's an old man who's a prophet there. He'll tell us where the donkeys is if we could just find him. They go into the city. They find him. And when Samuel sees Saul, God reveals, this is your king. This is your king right here. Anoint him king. And so Samuel anoints Saul king. I find it interesting that the man that is picked as king is this half-hearted, impatient donkey searcher. I think that'd make a good campaign slogan, don't you? And so he has now his king. Now, what's interesting is Samuel's going to make this big parade thing and announce, because nobody yet knows who is going to be king. This was kind of a private thing that was done. He's been anointed king, but nobody knows. So the coronation party needs to happen now. And so Samuel calls everyone back together. We're going to announce your king. Everybody, come on back in. Come on. Let's all gather together. All of Israel comes together to see who their king is going to be. This is going to be your first king of Israel. It's going to be an exciting thing. Let's do a parade. And so he has every one of the 12 tribes march before the stage. Now, of course, you can't get millions of people to march before the stage, so it was more like representatives of each tribe. And so, you remember the Olympics, the opening ceremony, when everybody marches into the arena and they're carrying their own flag, and then there's a bunch of people that are dressed in the colors of the country that march in. And so I imagine it happened like that, and it makes sense that they were actually carrying banners, because each of the tribes has a banner. They have an insignia. They have a logo, if you will. And you know one of those logos, it's from the tribe of Judah. It's the lion. When they saw the lion, they knew that's the tribe of Judah. And so they're all marching in, and all the tribes go by, and Judah goes by, but he doesn't select any of them until little Benjamin, he's probably the smallest one represented there, goes by. He says, this is the one, the tribe of Benjamin. That's where your king is going to come from. And everybody's cheering, especially the tribe of Benjamin. They're giving each other high fives. And then the tribe of Benjamin now has to divide up into representatives of their family clans. All right, now we got to get the family clans to march by. So they're giving, Samuel's giving this great parade. So now all the clans are going to pass by. So representatives each, no, it's not that one. No, it's not that one. No, it's not that one. Which one is it? Oh, I hope it's our clan, that kind of thing. And then Martree comes by, and everybody's saying, oh, that's just a little clan. And no, it's Martree. That's the clan. That's the family clan. And everybody's cheering. And Martree, they're all giving each other Jewish chest bumps because, it's kosher. And they're having a great time. And then, so Samuel, the excitement is just so intense. Who's it going to be in Martree's family? Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And he announces, it's going to be Saul, son of Kish. And everybody's, oh, Saul. There's all this cheering. There's all this excitement. And the confetti falls and the fireworks go off and the Blue Angel jets fly over. And everybody's so excited. But nothing happens. Where's Saul? He doesn't come to the stage. He's missing. Everybody's like, has anybody seen Saul? Who's Saul? I don't know, but this is going to be cool when we find him. Where's Saul? I don't know. And they stop clapping, and people start searching. The party seems to have to pause because where's this guy at? And they're searching, and finally Samuel goes to God and says, this guy's here, right? Where is he? And God answers him. He says, oh, he's hiding among the baggage. The king of Israel is hiding. So we're introduced to Saul as a donkey searcher. And now he's acting like one. Stubborn, doing things his own way, not really caring what the people think. They have to actually go and find him, and that's what they do. They go find him among the baggage. They ran and brought him out. And I imagine at this point, some of them are saying, now wait a second, this doesn't feel right. Our king is one who hides and doesn't even want to take responsibility. He's a coward. We don't want that guy to be our king. The problem is the idea of character, you can't see, can you? But you know what you can see? You know what you can see? You can see that this guy stood among the people a head above the rest. They ran and brought him out, and as he stood among the people, he was a head taller than any of the others. And they're like, this guy, he's got some issues, but boy, doesn't he look good in that robe. Let's make him king. And you know what they said? Long live the king! Long live the king! We love this guy! Oh, the other nations, they're going to be so impressed because we're going to have a king. And he's going to look so cool. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So they're all excited. They're going to get their king. And this begins for the Israelites a long history of mediocrity. This mediocre kingdom. Which is kind of sad if you think about it, because if God actually answered the prayers of the Israelites for a king, even though God had something better in store for them, God wanted something more, do you think maybe He does the same for us? Do you think maybe He gives us what we want sometimes, even though it's not what He wants to give us? It's not the best for us. I mean, think about this. Have you ever prayed? I mean, really, really prayed for something. Oh, God, please. I want this. Please, please, please give me this, please. I need this. This is so important to me. God, if you will just do this one thing. You almost bargain with God, and you realize at some point, I hope you do, maybe you don't, maybe you do, though, you realize, I've never actually asked God if this is what He wants. I've never slowed down enough to say, God, am I following you? Am I right behind you? You ever pray for that girl, and you just pray for that girl, and you want that girl so bad, and please, God, give me that. And God has somebody else in store for you, but is it possible He gives you that girl? You ever pray for that job? Oh, if you could just have that job, it's better position, better money, better status. Everything about it is great, except in that core of who you are, you just don't feel right about it. But that's just so minor, because what you can see is the corner office. What you can see is the pay raise. What you can see is yourself driving a nice car. What you can see is your name on that little plaque that allows you to park in that spot that no one else gets. You see things that are so attractive, and you just feel this isn't where God is leading me. And you know what's crazy? Sometimes, even when we're there, we will pray for God's help to get what we feel He is not leading us to. Ever been there? Now, if this was the end of the Israelite story, we would say, oh, this is so sad, because mediocrity, who wants to live there? That's a terrible neighborhood. But it's not the end of the story, and here's why. Our impatience does not nullify the patience of God. And this story of impatient people has a bigger story. It's a story of a patient God. Just as your unfaithfulness doesn't nullify God's faithfulness, and your lack of love doesn't nullify God's love, and it can't nullify, because He is. The very fruits of the Spirit that we are supposed to have in our life because we live close to God are because God is these things, or God are these things. God is these things. He is. We're to be like these things. And so the story of Israel doesn't end here, because God in the background is preparing a second king for them. It's not the best that He wanted to have him be replaced with a king, but at least He's preparing a man after His own heart. And it takes years to prepare this man. He has to walk close with God. He knows he's going to be king, but he has to fight, and he has to struggle, and he has to grow, and he has to mature as he fights to stay close to his Father. Over and over again, he has to work upon it and return to it and continue to have a heart that follows closely after God's heart as the very fruit of the Spirit of God begins to work into his life, because the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, those are gifts from God. And when you're in His presence, they flow into your life. Here's the deal. If you find yourself struggling to make something fit because you see it and you want it, something may be wrong. You may be impatiently going after something. That may be a huge red flag. You know another red flag? Maybe the fact that you're justifying it within your own heart. Well, I know, but. If you do that in your heart, then maybe. That's just a big old red flag. Whoa, slow down. You're not following God. You're following something else. You've veered off the road. You've let in other cars, but this isn't God. And we do this all the time. And it's easy to do, isn't it? Because when we just let something in, we still can see God up ahead, and we're thinking, it's okay. This is how sin creeps in. It's just one thing. It's not a big deal. Whether it's a sexual sin or it's gossip or whatever it is you struggle with, you let it in one time. It's just one car, right? But then it becomes 2 cars. This is how addiction begins, right? You don't just wake up one morning saying, you know what, I think I'm just going to open up my life to addiction. I think that kind of life is exactly what I've always needed. No, it begins with 1 car that you let in. And then 2. This is the same way bitterness works. You have every right to be upset with that individual. I understand. You sit down and tell me the story, I'll probably nod with you. That's awful. I cannot believe they did that to you. You're right. That is terrible. But don't let bitterness stay. Because if you let that car in, there'll be another car. There'll be another person. There'll be another situation. You can't let bitterness stay. You've got to forgive as God has told us in His prayer to forgive as we are forgiven. We can't stay there, because when we do, we just let more into our life. Do you realize that this is where weak church attendance starts? Think about it. Your sporadic church attendance, and if you're here and you're a sporadic church attender, this is ordained by God that you're here on this particular Sunday. If this is you, or if this is somebody, this is how it starts. It's just, something came up, right? Something came up, and it's, but I want to do it. It looks so good, and it's going to be good for the family, or good for the future, whatever it is. We will find a way to justify it, won't we? It's just 1 car. It's not a big deal. We can still see God. It's just 1 week. Of course, it turns into 2 weeks, which leads into 4 weeks, which leads into your wife getting all mad at you. Well, that's the other story. Forget that. It's just a little bit. We can still see God. Here's the problem. The problem is that the further away you get from God, the further away you get close to the one who provides for you the very gifts you need. You can't manufacture patience. You can't be patient because you choose to be. You can be close to God, who is patient. He says you can't even love unless you've experienced love by God. Sometimes we think, well, that's just the example of love because He died on the cross for my sins. That's the example of love. No, it is actually love who is God, and God who is love. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, are gifts from God. And when you're in the presence of God, they flow into your life. And there's something about being together corporately that you just can't get, because what happens is when you let in 1 car, let in 2 cars, let in 3 cars, you find yourself not only having sporadic church attendance, but having sporadic prayer life and devotional life and giving life. And eventually it affects your hope and your peace and your joy as well, because all of those come from God. Jesus says, where 2 or more gather together, I am there. There's something spiritual that happens when we corporately gather. That includes small group, that includes Sunday school, that includes prayer group, that includes corporate worship. And the more that we're together, the more that we are able to bring in the presence of God. You realize that I don't have like this 3-step process for you. I can't give you a 3-step process for patience. All I can give you is what my wife told me when we were dating. Stay close to Dad. Maybe this morning, what you need more than anything is just to recommit yourself to God. You can do that privately where you're at. You can come forward and make it public so that we can pray for your strength, because we believe in the power of prayer. And we'll gather around you and pray for you. If you're ready to recommit yourself because you've just been living with several cars between you and God, and you're ready to live close to your daddy again, because there's nothing like walking with Him and following Him and living for Him. It is the story of God to follow Him. I invite you to come, and we would love to pray for you right up here. Maybe you're here this morning and you have never given your life to Jesus. Sure, you've heard the story. He died upon the cross for your sins, but you've never surrendered your life, allowing the gift of God of salvation to be yours. We also invite you to come during this time to share that you need Jesus. So we're going to stand. I'm going to pray. The worship team is going to lead us in a song. And during that song, slip out of the row and just come forward for what you need this morning. Father God, we come as those who are so easily distracted. There's all kinds of things that we see and we want, and staying close to you is a challenge. It's hard. It takes tremendous patience, and it's funny, what we want so badly from you, we seek elsewhere, and we never receive it when we do, and so for that we repent. God, you've asked us to not keep our eyes on the things we can see, but to have faith in the things we can't see. To have hope in the things we can't see that you've promised. To completely trust you. For some of us, what we need this morning is a good measure of imagination so that we can actually visualize and see you and see your promises and see the good life you want for us, so that we aren't distracted by the things we see in this world, because the vision of what you provide for us is so much bigger and so much better and so much grander. God, give us imagination to see your promises come to pass, to see you. We want to see Jesus. We want to see him clearly, so we won't get so distracted and so impatient and fall behind. Father, I pray for rededications this morning. I pray for new dedications. I pray that our lives just surrender to you and that we have the courage to do so now. In Jesus' name.